I've talked about psychopathy pretty extensively on past shows, so this is, again, another somewhat of a review topic. But let's break down the word first and foremost, and we're working on image number 4, slide number 4 on the whatonearthishappening.com radio show page, or if you're following in the podcast, this is podcast number 149. Psychopathy, if we break down the word, it comes from Greek in its origins. And it comes from the Greek noun psyche, and there it is written in Greek script. And the word psyche, or psyche in English, means mind. Okay? And the second part of the word, P-A-T-H-Y, psyche, and then P-A-T-H-Y, the second half of the word, comes from the Greek noun pathos. Pathos means suffering in Greek. So we put them together and it means suffering mind, or in other words, sickness of the mind, or suffering of the mind, or in other words, mental illness. That's what psychopathy is. And just think about it, pathology, it's the study of illness or sickness. So when we put that together with the psyche, it's about the illness or the sickness of the mind. That's what psychopathy is at its absolute essence. It is pure mental illness and sickness of the psyche. Really, if you go down to it, it's sickness of the soul. And there are many people who will still to this day insist, I still get emails from them, There's no such thing as psychopathy. It's an invented mental illness, as are all mental illnesses. There's no such thing as a mental illness. I mean, this is how naive people are. These are absolute new age children. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. They're new cage children, to borrow the term from Cameron Day and other researchers, okay? They are children of the new cage movement that haven't grown up, that haven't matured, that don't want to accept the real, that don't want to accept that which is true. Like I've said before in many past podcasts, accept that which is or continue to suffer. Understand and accept truth, or get used to the chains, folks. Get used to the chains of bondage. In other words, respect existence or expect resistance from the universe itself. Okay? Respect that which is. Respect existence or expect resistance from nature itself. Because that's all you're going to get if you want to deny that which is. And the people that want to believe it's all of a huge bed of roses here on the earth. And there's no such thing as mentally ill people. I mean, you're naive children. You're not looking at what is. You're looking at what you want to exist, what you want the reality to be. There are such a thing as mentally ill human beings. Mental illnesses are real. All you need to do is open up your eyes, take off the rose-colored glasses, and look at the behavior that's out there. And you don't think that's a product of psychological illness? Well, what's it the product of? So, I mean, I don't really want emails like that anymore. Okay, look, folks, my mind is made up, not because I have a belief system, because I've done enough study and homework over decades of my life. All right? You're not going to convince me something I know exists doesn't exist. I've studied it extensively from a perspective of psychology and neuroscience. All right? Not pseudosciences. Okay? Psychopathy, psychopathology of the mind exists and is real. Get over it. Get over yourself and your own ego. It's again, you don't want it to exist. You don't want to live in that world where, well, tough. It's such a shame, isn't it? That is the world, however. So get over yourself. Okay? Now, let's just get over the fact that psychopathy exists, and let's look at what it actually is. Because a lot of people are in confusion about what it is. They think it's this Hollywood variant of psychopathy. A psychopath, oh, it's got to be a serial killer, right? It's got to be a total lunatic wielding an axe and going after people at random. That's a psychopath. No, that a psychopath could be that, but that's not what a psychopath has to be like. As a matter of fact, most psychopaths are very good at covering up what they are. They become very good actors. You know, in order to survive, they can feign and pretend to be like a normal human being. And they gravitate into positions of power, and they put on that mask, as you see there in image number 4, this husk, this shell, this fake human being that's not even a human being, it's an animal that looks like a human being, puts on the mask and tries to look like a human. That's what a psychopath's really adept at. They're very, very skilled at doing that. And that's why naive people who are really children in their psychological makeup, okay, and haven't grown up and haven't become adult human beings psychologically and spiritually, want to believe there's no such thing. Because they don't want to accept that there are other intelligent beings walking amongst us that look human but are not human. That are animals that walk on 2 legs, but they are not human beings. So-called intelligent creatures, they have intellect, they don't have real intelligence. But they're intellectual creatures that walk on 2 legs, bipedal, they walk like a human being, they have speech, they talk like a human being, they look just like a human being, but they're not a human. And I'm not just trying to dehumanize a class of human beings. I'm telling you factually, definitively, they are not a human being. What makes a human being is that they are truly sentient and have the capacity to feel. A psychopath does not truly have the capacity to feel. They are like a computer program that's running, which is why this image here in image number 4 is so great. I saw that. I did a search for images that represent a psychopath, and this is the one that embodies it perfectly. It's some sort of a husk, a shell, a wraith that looks somewhat like a human when it puts the mask on, but underneath it's an empty husk or a shell that barely even resembles a human being. It's some sort of a shadow. Okay? Some empty, degraded husk form that has the vague semblance of a human, but is not a human, most certainly. And until we can understand psychopaths in that regard, you're not going to make any progress in overcoming their influence in this world. Zero. Get used to the chains of bondage, because that's where you're going to be for a long, 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 long time. Until you accept that this condition exists, that it is real, that it is operating around you, and that these beings are not human beings. They are something other than a human being. So let's look at their characteristics, these animals that look human. They're aggressive, callous, and cunning. They are adept, cunning thinkers. They have intellect, cunning intellect. Not true intelligence, because true intelligence engages the feminine aspect of the psyche, which is the intuition and the compassion and the creative aspect of intelligence. Holistic intelligence comprises both intellect and the creative, generative side of the psyche, which these beings do not have. They only have the intellectual side. They have a complete lack, a complete absence of conscience and empathy, which we talked about earlier. No conscience, no ability to feel the repercussions of their behavior toward others. We'll continue with this list of the characteristics of psychopaths right after this break. Stay with us. Talking about the characteristics of psychopaths, let's get right back into it. This is slide number 5 on my images for tonight's show. They're aggressive, callous, and cunning. Very intellectual creatures, but not true holistic intelligent beings. Holistically intelligent beings. They have a complete absence of conscience and empathy. They cannot feel the repercussions in their physiology of what they do to others. And when I say that, I mean it literally. Cannot. It's not possible for them to feel empathy. As strange as that is for most people who do have that capacity, okay, there are beings in the universe that is true for. It would be like if you cut off someone's hand. Then you cauterized it and sutured it up so they didn't bleed out. They would no longer have a hand. They would no longer have the capacity to grasp something in that hand, in that limb, without some piece of artificial technology. The capacity would no longer be there. That's what a psychopath is like when it comes to the ability to feel. They're very adept at manipulating other people, especially emotional manipulation. Real good at getting to people through their emotions, not the psychopath's emotions, through the people they're manipulating, through their emotions. They can play up to other people's emotions to then manipulate them and get them to do what they want. They have a strong willingness to just take whatever they want and do whatever they please, and it doesn't make a difference who is hurt or wronged. They don't care about right or wrong. It's meaningless to them. They're meaningless ideas to them. That's all right and wrong are. It has nothing to do with natural law. They don't care that natural law exists. They don't care about the repercussions of breaking it. They just want to do whatever they want, take whatever they want. Whoever is wronged, it's meaningless to them. They're an animal. It's not a human being, folks. It's an animal. It's a pure animalistic consciousness embodied in human form. That's what you have to understand that a psychopath is. And get streetwise about this. We need to get streetwise about this. Because these beings are out there among us, feeding off of us. And you know what? People are still in denial of their existence. Still in denial, because they don't want to believe that's the world they live in. Psychopaths have a deceptive ability to appear outwardly benevolent, and that's because they're really good at feigning normal human emotions. They have a deceptive ability to behave in superficially charming ways to hide purely selfish motives. They have a willingness to use intimidation and violence to control others in order to satisfy their own needs. They have a willingness to intentionally violate the basic inherent human rights of others. Again, as I said, natural law rights are meaningless to these animals. They have a complete absence of any sense of guilt or remorse. So it doesn't matter who's hurt. They're not going to feel guilt. They're not going to feel remorse. They don't have the capacity to feel guilt or remorse. It isn't that they don't want to feel it. They can't feel it. There's a reason, because their limbic brain doesn't work the same way as a normally functioning human's limbic system in the brain, the midbrain. The mammalian brain is broken in a psychopath. And there's a reason it's broken, which we're going to get to. Psychopaths they rationalize their own immoral behavior. So rationalization's a big thing. Oh, I'm not really wrong for doing this. I have a right to do this. I can rationalize it and come up with a reason that it's okay that I just did that harmful behavior. And they'll attempt to lay blame on other people for their own conduct. That's another big characteristic of a psychopath, blaming other people, when in fact their own behavior was harmful. They will outright deny their own wrongdoing. So willful denial of truth is a big thing in psychopaths. They have total contempt toward the feelings and desires of their fellow beings. What you want, justice, truth, right, nobody violating your natural rights, that's meaningless to a psychopath. They don't care. They don't care. You know, if that's two words that sum up this whole list, don't care. That's what a psychopath is. A being that does not care, doesn't have the capacity to care or feel, period. They will pathologically lie, say anything without any concern for truth in order to advance their own hidden agenda. Here's a key point of their personality traits and characteristics. They have a very cunning, manipulative ability to feign normal human emotions and empathy. They watch other people and their behaviors, and they observe how they behave in certain conditions, like when a loved one dies. And they'll observe genuine emotional sadness, and then they'll mimic it like an actor. They will step into that role because they know they're different than other people. They know from a very, very young age that they're not normal human beings, that they're an animal that looks like a human but is not one. And so they have developed this very deceptive ability to act, to play act. You know, watch the TV show Dexter. It's a good example of a secondary psychopath who's play acting and trying to pretend like he feels the same thing that a regular human being feels. While Dexter in that series is not a primary psychopath, he was created as a secondary psychopath at a very young traumatic experience that he underwent. That doesn't mean a primary psychopathy does not exist. There are beings who are born like this, and it is a genetic condition that is a result of a deformation, a mechanism that is not working properly in the human genome, in our genomic code, the code that makes the human species what it is. There are things in that code that are not working right, that are not functioning right. We have anomalies, genetic anomalies in our actual genomic code. Over 4,000 genetic anomalies, genetic deformations that express as different types of diseases, different types of disorders, physically and mentally and psychologically. So, psychopaths also have a completely distorted sense of the consequences of their actions. They don't see the consequences. They just act in the moment like an animal. They don't look at the long-term consequences. So you say, psychopaths are destroying the world that they themselves have to live in. Well, that doesn't compute to them. It doesn't matter. They're living fully in instinct because they're an animal without a true ability to care about what they're doing in the present moment that may affect the future, even if it affects their ability to live in the future. That's what you have to understand that a psychopath behaves like. It's so unfathomable to the normally functioning human being that the mind, the soul could be that broken, that the normal mind often wants to reject it and say, my God, how could a creature such as this exist? You're talking about the proverbial vampire, the proverbial demon. Yes, exactly. Now you're getting closer to an understanding, if you think of it in those terms, of what a true psychopath is. They have a total failure to accept any personal responsibility for their own socially irresponsible ways. They will not accept responsibility. So forget trying to say, you're responsible for this, you caused this, you were the causal factor of this. Doesn't matter. They don't care. And they have a strong belief that they will never be brought to justice for their criminal behavior. Totally smug arrogance. You'll never beat me. You'll never take me down. I'm the top of the pecking order. I'm the top of the food chain. I deserve to be in the position that I'm in, and I'll be there forever. That's what they think. That's what they think. Let me tell you something, folks. Their reign is not going to last forever. What I want to talk about in the next section is the origin of this condition. So stay with us. We have to break on through in our understanding of the truth. And what will lie on the other side of that breakthrough is true freedom. If we are willing to go all the way in that truth, and we're going to start venturing into some pretty uncomfortable areas, and psychopathy is one of them. But you know what's even more uncomfortable than understanding that psychopathy exists? And this is one of the reasons why a lot of people don't want to acknowledge its existence. Because once you understand that this exists, and there's this creature here with us on the earth called the psychopath, which I would say possibly makes up a percent, not even a percent, a portion of 1% of the population of humanity, if that. Once you understand that that condition exists, what you have to do is wrestle with a profound implication. And that is, why does it exist? How was this condition created? Because if it's here with us, there has to be a reason it's here. Something had to make it. Something had to create it and put the psychopath here on earth with us. So what did that? What is the origin of this seemingly insane condition? You know, yeah, these are insane people. But I'm saying that the actual idea of it seems crazy and insane to even contemplate that something like this could even exist. to those of us who do have normally functioning emotional makeup, a normally functioning emotional makeup. So my next question that I'm going to pose, and people, who call in could take a crack at answering this, is what is the origin of psychopathy? And I'm going to look at just 4 potentials, 4 possibilities, because, from here I'm not going to claim I absolutely know the truth of this. I'm going to put what I feel is the best explanation of this out there for people's consideration. So look, folks, I'm not going to claim to know the absolute truth when it comes to this. I feel that I have an educated understanding of this condition because I've studied deeply into what it is and all of the possibilities regarding why it may exist. So from here on forward, in many of the next shows that I do, we have to understand I'm going to enter the realm of speculation. You shouldn't take my word as gospel truth. At any time, you really shouldn't. I've said that from day one. The worst thing you could do is believe me on anything. You need to do your own due diligence. You need to do your own homework. You need to do your own research. You need to do your own reading and digging. You need to apply the trivia methodology, a truth discovery methodology that is based in the scientific methodology to come up with an understanding that is accurate. Don't just believe anybody. When you read other works, when you read source works, which we'll be getting into on future shows, we'll be looking at, ancient texts, okay? We'll be looking at interpretations of those ancient texts. We'll be looking at syntheses of all this information. I'll be reading from a lot of texts. You can't just take everything at face value. You have to compare and contrast it. You have to look at a whole wide, eclectic variety of knowledge and compare and contrast it. Weed out logical inconsistencies and come to a logical conclusion by processing that available information. Then maybe we could bring all those pieces to the table and arrive at knowledge and arrive at truth eventually. So, maybe we should call the future shows on What on Earth is Happening, What on Earth very well may have occurred, and that we have to be willing to be open-minded about looking into so that we can come to an understanding about what very well may have occurred here in the ancient past. Maybe that should be the name for upcoming shows on What on Earth is Happening. Because up to this point, I've covered things that are fairly provably true. And I know are taking place. I could state I know that they are taking place. Here, I could say I'm making a best educated hypothesis regarding what occurred here that led to the current human condition. So again, nobody should be taking this as 100% gospel truth. You shouldn't be doing that with any of my work. No one should be doing that with anybody's work. You should always look at it, compare and contrast it, and then come to a conclusion about it after you've processed the information in great depth. That having been said, let's look at 4 possible origins for the condition called psychopathy. Possibility number 1, and I've heard this from a lot of people who I've posed the question to, hey, tell me where you think psychopathy came from. And people will say it's completely natural. This is a natural evolutionary condition. You know what, people? I personally think this is the most dangerous view to take. I personally think that this is the most, and not to just color this first possibility, we have to consider it, okay? Not to just color it negative and evil right on its face. I'm just saying, I personally feel that this is the product of a very poisoned worldview when people think, I've heard people say, I think psychopaths are the alpha humans. These are the people who deserve to be in charge and rule the planet. I've actually heard people state that. That's like saying, how I think of myself is that I actually belong in bondage. I belong in slave chains. That's that worldview. It's no different. It's no different than saying, these are the people I believe should be my rulers and slave masters because they have no emotions and no ability to feel. So somehow nature made that condition and has allowed these people to rule the roost of humanity through absolute ruthlessness, viciousness, and immorality. And somehow that's a right condition that should continue in nature because my Darwinian religion tells me that that's the quote-unquote natural order. Well, you know what I think of people who think like that? I think they are extensive fools who have bought into a religion called Darwinism, who believe that they are somehow rightfully slaves on this planet, and somehow total absolute lunatics who are mentally ill are somehow in a rightful position of rulership in this world. That's mental illness in and of itself, ladies and gentlemen. So, that's my view on this position, personally, but let's just look at what this position states. That psychopathy is a natural occurrence in nature. It's natural. Nature made us this way. It made a certain subset of humanity this way. That psychopathy is a naturally occurring phenomenon. It's a set of characteristics which developed in humanity, or I should have put down, developed in a subset of humanity, as part of, quote, I should have wrapped this in quote, evolutionary adaptation of our species to certain environmental conditions. And, extreme survival circumstances can create psychopathic tendencies. If you're constantly in fight-flight mode and you're unable to leave that condition mentally and psychologically, you can become a secondary psychopath. I'm not really talking about secondary psychopathy in this question, where did psychopathy come from? I'm talking about primary genetic type 1 or primary psychopathy. The kind of psychopathy that is created through environmental stressors or conditions is secondary psychopathy, which is reversible. Secondary psychopaths were normally functioning human beings with the ability to feel and empathize at some past point in their lives. And then they lost that due to a traumatic circumstance which they were unable to overcome or escape. Okay? So prolonged fight or flight conditions can create secondary psychopaths. So you could look at it as, did prolonged survival circumstances create a subset of psychopathic people? The reason I don't think that's the case, even though, yes, that's possible, okay, is even after prolonged set of survival conditions is in effect, and it may no longer be in effect, there are still people born with primary psychopathy, genetic psychopathy. So that's why I don't personally think that this explanation or possibility holds much water. There are people who may agree with it, and that's fine. I'm not going to tell you you must agree with me, but I don't believe if you apply Occam's razor, in a sense, to this hypothesis, this possibility number one, that it holds up. Personally, that's my take. Okay? Plus, I don't see that as a true evolutionary adaptation. I think true evolution means we're going toward a higher form of existence in consciousness. And true evolution means we're moving into a more moral place in our being, in our consciousness. Not a less moral one, which is what a psychopath certainly is. So people shouldn't look at these as the alpha humans. They should look at them as the absolute last in line when it comes to the evolutionary development of humanity. They are the ones that are leftovers, if anything, from a prior quote-unquote evolutionary lineage. Okay? This is the lowest form of evolutionary life on the totem pole of human form, because it is absolutely not a true human being. It is something that lacks the genuine characteristics of a real human being. Which is why I don't accept possibility number one personally. Once again, I'm throwing it out there as a potential. Okay? And people should seriously entertain it as a notion and really think about it. Absolutely. Again, I have done that process of taking this in and processing it and really deeply thinking about all the possibilities when it comes to this possibility number one, that psychopathy is a naturally occurring phenomenon, and it was an evolutionary quote-unquote adaptation. And I personally reject that as the answer to the reason that primary psychopathy exists. So let's look at the second, third, and fourth possibilities for psychopathy's existence in our world when we come back after this break. I'm going to just briefly outline these other three possibilities, and then I'm going to try to take a few phone calls so as not to leave the callers hanging. I know I wanted to get more calls in, but I'll go over these possibilities next week as well as a review before I get into some new material. Possibility number 2 for the possible origins of psychopathy in humanity. It was created by God. God did it. And psychopaths were put here on the earth alongside human beings as some form of punishment to torment human beings for reasons unknown. The creator of the universe just made this absolute condition of mental illness and lunacy and placed these animals here with us to torment us and eat us and, keep us as their slaves somehow, as some form of punishment for something we don't even understand that we did. I see this also as a very dark worldview, as a poisoned worldview, as a dangerous position to take because it leads one to believe that it's all just predetermined and since God did it, there's nothing you could do to fight it. If anything is disempowering, it's that worldview. I also don't take this position. I look at the 2 final possibilities that I'm going to propose as really the only sensible or possible ones. And that leads us to possibility number 3 on slide number 8. So we went through slide 6 and 7 as the first 2 possibilities. Slide number 8, possibility number 3. Human beings did this to ourselves. We created this condition in humanity because in our ancient past we may have arrived at a culture, a civilization of high technology at some point in our ancient past where we developed genetic technology and we performed a form of genetic manipulation upon ourselves or a subset of our species in an attempt to somehow create new capabilities in our species or improve upon our species. But in our inaccuracy in our genetic manipulation, we inadvertently created certain conditions in the human genome, and psychopathy was one of them. So we inadvertently created it ourselves. Now, that's if you believe the worldview that humanity was once a very high civilization, but it kind of forged its own path and was in control of its own destiny. That's not my particular worldview or how I see the ancient past having played out. And I'm going to be getting into why I don't think that this is the case and why the 4th possibility is the one that I most subscribe to for the actual origin of this condition. And that leads us to slide number 9, that it's possibility number 4, that something else did this to us, something other than humanity. In other words, something that was non-human, regardless of what you think that may be or what its nature is. I'm not going to sit here and argue and debate over the nature of what that thing was, that non-human form of intelligence. But essentially, this possibility could be described like this: some other form of intelligence that is decidedly not human created the condition of psychopathy within a subset, at least a subset of humanity, of human beings, either deliberately or inadvertently through some form of genetic modification or manipulation. And to me, this makes the most sense. And I know to some people, they'll say that makes the least bit of sense to them because they won't want to wrestle with the implication of non-human entities having been here upon the earth with us in the ancient past, or even possibly still being among us in the modern day, in the current day, because they don't want to live in that world. They don't want to even concede the possibility that that could be possible. Yet, many, many, many ancient texts talk about this scenario in extensive detail. And yet, scientism and modern interpretations of these texts claim that these are just mythological stories told by crazy people in the ancient world trying to entertain themselves. I ask people, think of archivists of information. I consider myself an archivist of information. Now, in the modern day, think about how relatively easy that is to do, to preserve and archive data sets. We have digital access. We have access to technology and machines that make that archiving process easy. I offer an archive drive. It's called an ARC for short. Amazing repository of knowledge. 1 terabyte of information on every topic you could possibly imagine under the sun. Okay? To research and study. You don't even have to search the internet. It's all right there on one drive. Really important material. But you know, the ease at which that can even be done in the modern day. Think about our ancient ancestors, the difficulty that they had in preserving knowledge, the lengths that they had to go, and then sects of the dark priest class and the controllers that they were up against to try to take them out, would murder them for attempting to spread this information in that time period. It was a direct risk to your life, to your physical life back then. We have it easy in comparison to spread this knowledge, to do the great work. In comparison to our ancestors who were attempting to do this work to enlighten their fellow brothers and sisters, we have it simple. So think about the level of difficulty they would have to go through to preserve this with nothing but ancient so-called technologies, non-technological civilization. You know, different forms of ancient writing. Pressing forms into tablets, into clay, writing down things on papyrus with reeds, on huge scrolls. I mean, you know, it's cake now in comparison. We could throw it on digital devices that are mobile, take it everywhere. You could have I have a library sitting right here in my hand, a tablet, 6,000 books on a tablet. Our ancestors would weep if they knew we had it that easy compared to what they had to do. So why would they have just told random stories? They were meticulously trying to preserve an account of history, as far as I'm concerned. And we'll be getting into those histories in later weeks on this show, starting next week. Let's go to your calls for the last few minutes. I know I didn't allow a lot of time. I apologize for that. Let's talk to Gonzalo in Toronto. Gonzalo, you're live on What on Earth is Happening. Are you with us?
Am I coming through clearly?
Yes, there you go. We don't have a lot of time.
Okay, I'd just like to say thanks for the show, first of all.
Sure.
And my question to you would be, in terms of psychopathy, when did you come across it? Because, funnily enough, I see even some musicians and other people integrating their encounters with psychopaths and pushing it off in their art.
Yeah, I've probably been studying it for the greater part of 20 years of my life now. So I've been aware of it for the larger part of 2 decades, and have studied it in different capacities, from a spiritual perspective, from a scientific intellectual perspective in the sense of psychology and neuroscience, etc. And also looking at its origins, or attempting to delve into the explanation for its origins over probably the last decade of my life. So it's been a long journey and a long study for me, and most people haven't even begun a study of this. Most people are maybe not most, but many people are still in denial of its existence, let alone having started an actual rigorous study of it. And that needs to change. We need to make more people aware that this is something that we really need to become aware of and study in depth to understand these beings are all around us. You know, there's not as many of them as there are good people, most certainly. But they are out there, and they're in positions of power. Psychopaths weasel their way into positions of power in this world. We prop them up. We're the ones who prop them up.